Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all still healthy these days? Today, I will take little Micah to the neighboring village to see if we can find anything to buy and sell at the market. The morning at Huyen and Appo's small house begins with gentle sunlight spreading over the lush garden. After waking up and taking care of baby Micah, Huyen slowly sweeps the dirt yard with a bamboo broom. Each row of tender, green vegetables is carefully cultivated and now covered in early dew, bringing a sense of peace in the quiet countryside. On the porch, baby Micah toddles after her mother, sometimes sitting to play with the soil, sometimes giggling and calling the small dog that wags its tail around the yard. Although life is still full of hardships, the simple bamboo house is filled with the warmth of mother and child's love and hope for a peaceful new day. Huyen is crouching beside a small garden bed in front of the yard, skillfully using a bamboo stick to dig holes in the soil for planting vegetables. The gentle morning sunlight softly covers her hair, which still has a few specks of dirt. The lush, young vegetables are carefully placed in neat rows, and then she gently mounds soil around the roots to keep the plants steady. Next to her is a small bag containing the seedlings she just brought back, and the dry, cracked yard is gradually becoming full of life. Huyen works attentively with a serious yet hopeful expression, because she knows these vegetable beds will help the mother and daughter have more food in the coming days. Huyen hurried into the small bamboo house as the early wind began to blow strongly through the porch. She quickly grabbed the old checkered shirt hanging by the thatched roof and put it on hastily. Under the faint morning sunlight, Huyen and Appo's slender figure appeared even smaller in the simple house. Next to her mother, little Micah hugged a large bamboo basket almost as tall as herself, her innocent eyes looking up at her mother attentively. The space around the house remained peaceful with the scent of bamboo and the rustling sound of leaves. Huyen bent down to close the bamboo door of the small house and carefully used a wooden stick to wedge it securely. The early morning sunlight shone on the dry thatched roof, casting a warm yellow hue around the dirt yard in front of the house. Next to her mother, little Micah struggled to help her carry a bamboo basket on her shoulder with her tiny hands. The girl tried to keep the basket from falling while looking up at her mother with an innocent smile, causing Huyen to smile softly. Huyen gently adjusted the bamboo basket on her shoulder, and then took Micah and Appo's small hand. The bamboo door behind was tightly closed, and the simple house lay silent beneath the rustling thatched roof in the early breeze. Little Micah trotted after her mother along the small dirt path in front of the yard, her tiny sandals leaving imprints on the dry ground. The morning sunlight stretched across the rows of trees, casting shadows of the mother and daughter as they slowly left the familiar house. Although many hardships lay ahead, Huyen quietly walked on, carrying hope for a more peaceful life for her young daughter. Huyen and her mother hold hands tightly as they walk along a small path amidst lush green rice fields. A gentle breeze blows, causing the rice stalks to sway like gentle waves stretching to the horizon. The bamboo basket on Huyen and Appo's back sways slightly with each step, while little Micah happily skips beside her mother, occasionally looking up at the flock of birds flying across the clear blue sky. The morning sunlight bathes the fields in a golden hue, creating a simple yet warm scene. In the vast rural space, the small figures of mother and child quietly remain together, continuing through difficult days with simple love. On the quiet countryside road, Huyen was carrying baby Micah in her arms, with a bamboo basket that had faded over the years on her back. As she passed by a house, she suddenly saw a bongbong tree heavy with ripe, red fruits, gently swaying in the wind. Huyen softly stopped, her eyes focused on the bunches of fruit as if she was contemplating something. Baby Micah, curious, turned her head to look at her mother, her round eyes full of delight. After a moment of hesitation, Huyen decided to enter the yard of that house to ask about buying the fruits to sell at the market. In her heart, a small hope flickered that those fruits could help the mother and child earn some extra income for the days ahead. Just past the simple bamboo gate, Huyen carried Micah in her arms and called out loudly, "Is anyone home?" Her voice echoed across the quiet yard. After a moment, hearing sounds from inside, someone came out and looked at the mother and child with curiosity. Huyen bowed politely, still holding Micah and the bamboo basket on her back. She softly asked, "Yes. We have a bongbong tree with ripe fruit in the garden. I wonder if you are selling any?" After speaking, Huyen looked toward the bongbong tree, which was heavily laden with fruit and swaying in the wind. Her face showed a shy but hopeful expression, while little Micah nestled in her mother and Appo's arms, silently watching the stranger in front of the house. After hearing the landlord happily agree to sell, Huyen gently smiled and thanked him, then softly placed little Micah down in the yard. The girl stood close to her mother, her curious eyes looking up at the tree full of ripe yellow fruit. Huyen slowly approached the tree trunk, reached out and picked a low-hanging fruit within reach. The outer shell had turned a bright red, indicating that the fruit was fully ripe. She split the fruit with her hand and took a small bite. The sweet, mellow taste spread across her tongue, causing Huyen to nod slightly in satisfaction. Her eyes sparkled with a rare hint of joy after days of hardship. Behind her, little Micah watched her mother intently, while a gentle breeze caused the leaves on the tree to rustle softly in the peaceful morning. Huyen took the small bag she carried in her backpack and carefully tied it tightly to her waist for easy fruit collection. After adjusting it to be secure, she walked to the sturdy tree, holding onto the trunk, and slowly climbed up. The branches gently swayed with each of her steps, and a few dry leaves fell softly to the ground. Below, little Micah looked up with wide eyes, watching her mother with delight, while the homeowner stood quietly on the porch observing. Huyen clings tightly to the tree trunk and slowly climbs up the large branches covered in green moss. The bag tied to her side gently sways with each of her steps. Amid the lush foliage, clusters of ripe red and pink fruits peek out in the early sunlight. Huyen skillfully places her feet on a sturdy branch, one hand holding the trunk, the other reaching out to pick each bunch of fruit and placing them into the bag on her side. A gentle breeze blows, causing the leaves to rustle, and a few small petals fall to the ground below. On Huyen and Appo's face sprinkled with sweat, her focused and patient expression remains visible. Huyen stands steadily on a large floating branch, skillfully plucking bunches of ripe, pinkish-red fruit and placing them into a bag tied to her waist. Amid the dense green leaves, the heavy bunches of floating fruit sway gently with her movements. Occasionally, a ripe fruit slips from her hand and falls to the ground, making a small "bup" sound on the dry leaves beneath the tree. While reaching up to pick the floating bunches high above, Huyen suddenly hears Micah cheer below. "Mom, a fruit fell to the ground." She looks down at her little daughter holding several floating fruits in her arms, her face smudged but full of joy. Huyen smiles softly and gently says, "Pick it up and put it in the basket for me." Micah crouched down to pick up each floating fruit that had just fallen under the tree with her tiny hands. Every time she picked one up, she would hold it up to examine it, then carefully wipe off the dirt on the outside with the hem of her shirt before placing it into the bamboo basket. Micah and Appo's focused and serious expression made Huyen, watching from the tree, softly smile. Picking up all the floating fruits under the tree, little Micah carefully placed the basket down and tried to carry the small bamboo shoulder bag onto her shoulder. The bag was almost half her height, so when she put it on, Micah staggered a few steps, causing the bag to tilt slightly to one side. She immediately reached out to steady it and looked up at her mother in the tree with a proud expression, as if she had just accomplished something great. Huyen looked down and saw her obedient little daughter helping, then gently smiled. Amidst the garden full of ripe fruits and the rustling of leaves, little Micah carrying the bamboo bag on her shoulder looked tiny but incredibly adorable. Huyen continued climbing higher branches of the floating tree, where the branches were much thinner and more delicate. Her bare feet skillfully grasped each branch that was gently swaying in the wind. The bag tied to her waist swayed slightly with each movement, causing the surrounding leaves to rustle constantly. At the top of the tree, clusters of ripe red floating fruits grew at the very end of the branches, out of reach. Huyen had to hold the trunk tightly with one hand and stretch herself as far as possible with the other to pick each bunch of fruit. The small branch bent under her weight, making anyone watching feel nervous. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, shining on Huyen's focused face, sweat beads rolling down her cheeks, but she still patiently picked each fruit one by one. In the quiet space of the garden, the slender figure of the young mother teetered on the top of the tree as if trying to gather every bit of hope for her and her child and Appo's life. After continuously picking for a while, the bag on Huyen and Appo's side was also filled with plump, ripe red fruits. She reached out to hold the heavy bag and looked down to find a safe place to put her feet. The small branches at the top gently swayed with each of her movements amid the rustling leaves in the wind. Huyen slowly descended from branch to branch, her hand gripping the moss-covered trunk firmly. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, shining on her sweaty hair. At the base of the tree, little Micah looked up at her mother and cheerfully called out when she saw her carrying a full load of ripe fruits. After a few careful steps, Huyen finally set her foot on the ground, exhaling softly in relief, and smiled at the harvest that the mother and daughter had just gathered on that peaceful morning. Huyen gently removed the bag from her side, then bent down to pick up the bamboo basket placed under the tree. She slowly poured out the ripe, red bongbong fruits inside. Clusters of the fruits rolled down into the small basket, their pinkish-red color standing out among the green leaves still attached to the branches. Little Micah stood beside her, watching the basket fill up with delight and giggling. The girl also reached out to touch the shiny, round fruits, then looked up at her mother happily. Huyen wiped the sweat from her forehead lightly, a hint of satisfaction in her eyes as she saw the fruits of her morning labor. The basket was filled with ripe red bongbong fruits, and the homeowner also stepped out from the yard to help Huyen. She bent down to pick up the remaining scattered fruits on the ground and gently placed them into the bamboo basket. Huyen stood beside her, opening a large bag, carefully holding the opening so the lady could put each handful of fruits inside. After packing all the bongbong into the bag, the homeowner went inside to get an old scale and brought it out to the yard. She placed the bag down and handed the scale to Huyen, who carefully hooked the scale and Appo's cord to weigh it. Both of them watched attentively as the needle slowly moved, while little Micah stood beside them, curious and looking up. Huyen gently nodded and told her the weight in kilograms that she had just weighed for her. Huyen smiled lightly, her eyes shining with a bit of joy because the morning's harvest for the mother and daughter was quite good. She reached out to wipe the sweat from her forehead, then looked at the bag full of plump, pinkish-red fruits with satisfaction, while Micah happily hugged the bamboo basket standing close to her mother. The two quietly arranged the remaining fragrant, sweet-smelling plump fruits together. Huyen stood silently for a moment, then mentally calculated the amount of money. Her lips moved slightly as she counted each kilogram of fruit, her eyes focused but still with a hint of happiness. After finishing the calculation, Huyen opened the small bag she carried, carefully counted the neatly folded bills, and politely handed them to the landlady. "Yes, I am sending the money, ma'am." The landlady accepted it and smiled kindly. Huyen also bowed her head to thank her for allowing the mother and daughter to pick the fruit. Nearby, little Micah, holding a bamboo basket, looked at her mother with sparkling eyes, while the plump pink bag lay neatly on the ground, a symbol of a hard but hopeful morning. Before leaving, Huyen bent down and gently brushed off the dirt on her feet, then put on her old sandals. After that, she took the small hat she carried and gently placed it on Micah and Appo's head. Huyen and Appo's hands carefully adjusted the hat and Appo's strap to straighten it and lightly brushed her daughter and Appo's bangs. Micah obediently stood still, her big eyes looking at her mother with delight. The small conical hat shielded her from the increasingly harsh midday sun. Seeing my mother sitting and leaning back, her hands clutching the heavy, bulging bundle to gain momentum to carry it onto her shoulder. Little Micah hurriedly ran over, her tiny hands pushing against her mother and Appo's back as if trying to help her gain strength. Huyen gently bit her lip, struggling to lift the bundle amid heavy breathing. When she felt Micah and Appo's small hands trying to support from behind, she softly turned to look at her and smiled emotionally. Although Micah and Appo's strength was nothing compared to the heavy bundle, her innocent concern warmed Huyen and Appo's heart. Huyen struggled for a long time to carry the full basket of bonbon onto her shoulder. She slightly leaned forward due to the weight, one hand holding the strap of the basket, and the other guiding little Micah as they prepared to leave. At that moment, the landlady stepped out from behind. In her hand were a few freshly picked pinkish red bonbon from under the tree. She called out, "Hey, I'll give you some more." Saying that, she gently added more bonbon into Huyen's bag. She quickly turned back, her face full of surprise, then bowed her head to thank her profusely. The kind gaze of the landlady made Huyen feel suddenly warm amidst the difficult day. Huyen gently bowed to the landlady and softly said, "Thank you once again for having me here, Ma and Appo's." Then she bent down to carry baby Micah in her arms because she was starting to feel tired after the whole morning of following her mother. The heavy, full bundle on her shoulder made Huyen and Appo's steps slower, but she still tried to keep her balance to carry her belongings while holding her child tightly. Micah wrapped her arms around her mother and Appo's neck, and her small hat tilted slightly to one side with each step. The mother and child gradually left the garden, their small figures disappearing down the sunny rural dirt road. Behind them, the landlady still stood at the gate, watching with a gentle gaze, while the swaying trees gently moved in the wind, as if seeing the mother and child off after a morning full of hardship but warm with human kindness. On the way to the town market, Huyen and her child quietly walked along a small path through vast green rice fields. The young rice stalks swayed in the wind, forming gentle waves stretching under the afternoon sun. Huyen carried a basket on her shoulder, while little Micah ran ahead excitedly. Occasionally, Micah looked up at the white storks flying gracefully over the fields and pointed with delight. The breeze from the fields carried a gentle scent of young rice, making the space feel unusually peaceful. Although her steps were still heavy from the basket full of fruit on her shoulder, Huyen tried to walk steadily, hoping to reach the market quickly to sell some produce and support their lives. Amidst the vast countryside, the small figures of mother and child quietly relied on each other as they continued their journey. When arriving at the busy town market, Huyen gently bowed and carefully placed the basket full of fluffy, heavy bonbon down on the edge of the road. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with her hand and then opened the bag, carefully selecting each pinkish-red bunch of bonbon to place into the woven basket she carried. Huyen and Appo's movements were slow and tender, as if afraid that the soft ripe fruits would be crushed. Micah sat beside her, attentively watching her mother work, occasionally reaching out to help pick up a few fruits that rolled away. Soon, the woven basket was filled with fresh, delicious bonbon, the pinkish-red color standing out amidst the lively countryside market. Huyen used both hands to lift the basket and then placed it neatly on the edge of the bamboo basket in front of her, preparing for sale. Amid the sounds of people passing by and the bustling noise of the town market, mother and daughter sat beside the small bonbon basket, full of hope for a successful day of selling. Seeing an old woman begging sitting curled up beside an old hat, Huyen gently looked over and quietly stood up. She approached the basket, took some beautiful ripe fruit, and placed it into the woman and Appo's hand, then softly said, "Eat this to ease your hunger." Then Huyen bent down again, opened her small bag, carefully took out a few coins she had just saved, and placed them into the woman and Appo's hand. Although her life and her child and Appo's life were still very difficult, Huyen couldn't and Appo's bear to ignore someone more unfortunate than herself. The old woman tremblingly accepted it, her old eyes shining with continuous gratitude. Little Micah, standing beside her mother, also obediently looked at the old woman and gently smiled. Amidst the busy and noisy market, Huyen and Appo's simple act made that small space warmer with genuine human kindness. After a long journey with her mother from early morning, little Micah started to feel tired. She slowly walked over and leaned against her mother, her eyes half closed from sleepiness. Huyen gently sat her on her lap beside the basket outside the market. Micah obediently curled up in her mother and Appo's arms, her small hat tilted to one side revealing a face flushed pink from the sun. Huyen softly stroked her hair, her rough hands gently fanning her to cool off amid the bustling market atmosphere. Despite feeling tired from a hard morning, her eyes remained gentle and full of love as she looked at her little daughter, who was nestled in her arms seeking a moment of peace and familiar warmth. Sitting and waiting for a while in the busy market area. Finally, a customer stopped in front of the basket of bonbon belonging to mother and daughter. Seeing the customer inquire about buying, Huyen happily stood up. She quickly opened her bag, carefully selected the ripe and beautiful bonbon, and placed them into the customer and Appo's hands with a hopeful expression. Micah, sitting beside her, also curiously looked at her mother selling, her eyes brightening when she saw the basket of bonbon had decreased a little. After selling the goods, Huyen gently smiled with relief and took the small change she had just earned to buy Micah a small ice cream. The little girl happily giggled, holding the ice cream, her lips smeared with a bit of cold, sweet ice cream. Watching her daughter enjoy the ice cream happily in the bustling market, Huyen also felt her heart soften. Although life was still full of difficulties, just seeing Micah happy made all her hardships seem lighter. After sitting and selling goods in the scorching midday sun for a while, Huyen also began to feel her stomach growling because she hadn't Appo's had anything to eat since morning. She gently picked up a purple fruit from the basket, broke it in half with her hand, and slowly ate small pieces. The sweet, slightly tangy taste of the fruit made her feel a bit less tired. Next to her mother, little Micah stood obediently holding the small ice cream she had just bought, eating while pressing close to her mother. Occasionally, the girl would lift the ice cream to show her mother and then giggle with delight. Huyen looked at her child, her lips slightly curved into a gentle smile despite her face still showing signs of fatigue. Customers started to visit the small stall of the mother and daughter to buy bonbon. Some people passing by saw the bright red ripe fruits and stopped to ask the price, while others complimented the fruits for being beautiful and fresh. Every time a customer arrived, Huyen quickly selected the best fruits and put them into the bag for the customer, her tired face from the morning gradually brightening up. Micah stood next to her mother, finishing her ice cream while obediently watching her mother sell. Occasionally, the girl helped her mother hold the bag or pick up the fallen fruits from the basket. The lively sounds of bargaining mixed with children and Appo's laughter made the small market corner of the mother and daughter feel warmer. The bonbon basket gradually emptied over time. Seeing the increasing number of fruits sold, Huyen let out a gentle sigh of relief, her heart filled with a little hope that today, the mother and daughter would earn enough money for the days ahead. Sitting at the market from morning until noon, little Micah was starting to get tired. At first, she just rubbed her eyes and snuggled into her mother, but after a while, her crying grew louder due to sleepiness and the heat. Huyen hurriedly put down her bag, bent down to pick up Micah in her arms, and gently comforted her. She softly rocked her in her hands, her rough hands tenderly stroking the messy hair over her forehead. And quote, "Be good, Mom is here." And quote. Hearing her mother and Appo's voice, Micah gradually quieted down but still clung tightly to her mother and Appo's neck, exhausted. Huyen, while soothing her, looked at the remaining basket in front of her, her eyes slightly worried. After a moment, she sighed softly and carefully sat Micah against her shoulder, then struggled to lift the basket onto her shoulder to continue selling. Once again, a few customers came to buy bonbon. Huyen happily quickly selected the fruits and put them into the bag for the customers, while little Micah leaned her head on her mother and Appo's shoulder, her eyes half closed from tiredness. Not long after, the woven basket in front of the mother and daughter was almost empty, with only a few fruits left at the bottom. Huyen looked at the remaining bonbon and gently smiled with relief. She carefully gathered the last few fruits, wrapped them in a small bag to bring home for the two of them to snack on. The remaining pink-red fruits, though not many, were still a small gift for Huyen after a hard day. As the market gradually thinned out, Huyen gently stroked Micah and Appo's hair and looked at the nearly empty basket with hopeful eyes. A tiring day finally paid off with a little money and a meal for the mother and daughter in their small countryside house. Seeing that the sky was already turning evening, Huyen began packing her belongings to take Micah home. She carefully folded the bamboo basket, gathered the remaining puffed bags, and placed them into the back of the cart. After a long day sitting at the market, her face showed clear signs of fatigue, but her eyes still reflected a slight sense of relief from having sold quite a lot of goods. Little Micah rubbed her sleepy eyes and obediently held out her hand for her mother to hold. Huyen bent down to adjust her small hat for her child, then lifted Micah into her arms and slowly stood up, carrying the cart on her shoulder. The mother and daughter gradually left the increasingly deserted town market. When she reached the market gate, Huyen suddenly saw two disabled people sitting quietly by the roadside. One was sitting in an old wheelchair, and the other, thin and standing behind, was pushing the wheelchair through the crowd. Seeing their tired appearance, Huyen gently stopped. She bent down to take the small bag she had carefully prepared earlier to bring home for her mother and child, and softly handed it to them. "Please take this to help with your hunger." Then Huyen opened her small bag again, slowly took out some money she had earned that day, and placed it into the man and Appo's hand pushing the wheelchair. Although the amount was not large, it was the effort of a long, hard day at the market. The disabled couple looked at Huyen with deep emotion, continuously thanking her. Little Micah stood beside her mother silently watching, her innocent eyes seeming to understand her mother and Appo's act of sharing. In the late afternoon at the busy market gate, Huyen and Appo's small act made the atmosphere warmer, filled with genuine kindness among people still facing many hardships. Huyen and little Micah happily hold hands as they walk along a small path crossing a vast rice field to return home. After a long and tiring day at the market, Huyen and Appo's face, though still tired, has softened with joy from selling her goods and seeing her daughter always by her side. The bamboo stick behind her gently sways with each slow step she takes. The evening breeze blows through, making the green rice fields sway gently like waves under the pale sunset. Little Micah happily trots beside her mother, occasionally looking up at the flock of birds flying across the sky and giggling with delight. Sometimes the girl tightens her grip on her mother's hand as if afraid of getting lost in the peaceful countryside road. In the vast space of the countryside, the small figures of mother and daughter quietly walk side by side, carrying a simple sense of peace after a day full of hardships but filled with love and human warmth. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Appo's mother and daughter, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through the difficult days. Thank you all very much.